A college student thought he was checking rabbit traps. Instead, he found America's most haunting mystery. Inside a discarded JCPenney bassinet box, hidden in the frozen Philadelphia woods, lay the naked body of a 4-year-old boy. He weighed only 30 pounds, so malnourished his tiny frame looked skeletal. His body was covered in bruises, evidence of brutal, repeated beatings. But here's what stopped investigators cold. Someone had carefully groomed this child after killing him. His fingernails were perfectly trimmed, his hair freshly cut, with clumps still clinging to his skin. His wrinkled hands showed he'd been bathed recently. Every detail screamed of meticulous postmortem care. This wasn't panic. This was a disturbing act of twisted love after violence. The most chilling part? Nobody ever reported him missing. Not one person came forward to identify him. He became America's unknown child, a boy who lived completely invisible to everyone around him. How does a 4-year-old vanish without a single soul noticing? If this case already has you hooked, hit the like button, subscribe, and drop your theories in the comments below. Because what scientists discovered 65 years later, using revolutionary DNA technology on genetic fragments smaller than confetti, will shatter everything you believe about this mystery. February 25, 1957. Fox Chase, Philadelphia. The morning air was bitter cold when a college student made his way through the wooded area off Susquehanna Road. He was there for one simple reason: checking his rabbit traps before heading to class. What he discovered would change his life forever. But the student kept a secret for 2 crucial days that would cost investigators vital evidence. His name has never been released, but his hesitation stemmed from fear. He worried police would confiscate his illegal rabbit traps, so instead of calling authorities, he confided in a priest first. 2 precious days passed before police received the call that would launch Philadelphia's longest-running homicide investigation. Detective Bill Kelly would become the face of this case for nearly 5 decades. Kelly dedicated his entire career to finding answers, becoming what colleagues called singularly obsessed with identifying the mysterious child. He interviewed thousands of witnesses, chased down countless leads, and carried the boy's death mask to potential leads across the country. But Kelly would die never knowing the boy's name. 65 years later, Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick would take on what she called the most challenging case of my career. This forensic genealogist specialized in extracting identities from the impossible, degraded DNA, decades-old remains, cases other experts had abandoned. But Fitzpatrick was about to attempt the impossible, with DNA fragments she described as being like confetti. The boy they were all searching for was Joseph Augustus Zarelli, just 4 years old, living an invisible life near 61st and Market Streets in West Philadelphia. When police finally arrived at the crime scene on February 26, 1957, they found a tableau that would haunt Philadelphia for decades. The child's body lay inside a JCPenney bassinet box, the kind sold for $24 at department stores across the city. He was wrapped in a plaid blanket, positioned carefully as if someone had tried to make him comfortable for his final rest. The medical examiner's report painted a horrific picture of the boy's short life. He stood just 40 inches tall and weighed only 30 pounds, severely malnourished for a 4-year-old. His tiny body bore the evidence of systematic abuse, multiple bruises in various stages of healing, indicating repeated beatings over time. The cause of death was blunt force trauma. Someone had killed this child with devastating violence, but the crime scene held contradictions that baffled investigators. Scattered around the box, they discovered a man's blue corduroy cap, a child's scarf, and a white handkerchief embroidered with the letter G. These items seemed randomly placed, as if dropped during the disposal. The medical examination revealed even more puzzling details. The boy had several surgical scars, one on his ankle, another in his groin area, and a third on his chin. There were what appeared to be intravenous needle marks on his arm, suggesting recent medical treatment. Most disturbing of all, his fingernails had been freshly trimmed, his hair recently cut with scissors, and his skin showed the telltale pruning that comes from water immersion. Someone had bathed this child after killing him. The location itself posed another mystery. Joseph Augustus Zarelli lived near 61st and Market Streets in West Philadelphia, a bustling urban neighborhood. His body was found 15 miles away in the isolated woods of Fox Chase, a deliberate choice that suggested his killer wanted maximum distance from the child's home. As investigators processed the scene, they grappled with an impossible psychological puzzle. How do you kill a child in violent rage, then lovingly groom his body afterward? The brutality spoke of fury and complete loss of control. Yet the meticulous grooming suggested remorse, care, even twisted affection. These contradictory actions pointed to a perpetrator wrestling with complex emotions, or perhaps multiple people involved in Joseph's death and disposal. Philadelphia police launched one of the most extensive missing person campaigns in the city's history. They printed 400,000 flyers featuring the boy's photograph and distributed them throughout the Delaware Valley. Every gas bill sent to Philadelphia residents included the child's image. Post-mortem photographs, carefully staged to make the boy appear alive and sleeping, were circulated to police departments nationwide. Detectives carried a plaster death mask from door to door, hoping someone might recognize the child's features. The FBI's law enforcement bulletin alerted investigators across the country. The American Medical Association circulated detailed descriptions of his surgical scars, believing a doctor somewhere might remember treating him. Despite this massive publicity blitz, not a single credible identification emerged. Investigators traced the J.C. Penney bassinet box to local stores. But the paper trail went cold. No records existed of who purchased it. The blue corduroy cap found at the scene was tracked to a Philadelphia retailer, but again, the buyer remained unknown. Every piece of physical evidence led to frustrating dead ends. One theory gained significant traction in the 1960s. Medical examiner investigator Remington Bristow became convinced the boy was connected to a foster home run by Arthur and Catherine Nicoletti, located near the discovery site. Bristow suspected the child was the secret son of the Nicoletti's stepdaughter, hidden away due to the social stigma of unwed motherhood in 1957. He even consulted a psychic in his desperation to solve the case. Police thoroughly investigated every child who had lived with the Nicolettis. They accounted for each foster child, cross-referenced records, and interviewed former residents. When DNA testing became available decades later, scientists definitively ruled out the stepdaughter as the boy's mother, closing this avenue forever. In 2002, a woman known only as Mary contacted police with a disturbing claim. She alleged her abusive mother had purchased a boy named Jonathan from his birth parents in 1954. According to Mary's account, her mother flew into a rage when the child vomited baked beans in the bathtub, beating him to death before cutting his hair and dumping his body in Fox Chase. Mary's story contained compelling details that had never been released to the public, including the presence of baked beans in the boy's stomach and his wrinkled skin from water immersion. However, Mary had a documented history of mental illness, and neighbors who knew the family denied ever seeing a young boy in the house. Every door investigators opened led to another dead end. Each promising lead dissolved under scrutiny, leaving them no closer to identifying America's unknown child. Detective Bill Kelly carried this case for 46 years, longer than most people work their entire careers. He interviewed thousands of witnesses, chased leads across multiple states, and kept the boy's death mask in his desk drawer as a constant reminder of his failure to bring closure. Kelly described himself as singularly haunted by the case, unable to let go even after retirement. The emotional toll extended far beyond the police department. Kelly wasn't alone in his obsession. Many of the original investigators who worked the scene in 1957 died without ever learning the boy's identity. They carried the weight of this unsolved case to their graves, each one hoping they'd live to see the mystery resolved. The community refused to let the boy be forgotten. Every year on the anniversary of his discovery, strangers gathered at his grave to leave flowers and toys. The Vidocq Society, an organization of retired detectives and forensic experts, adopted the case as one of their priority investigations. Volunteers spent countless hours researching leads and maintaining public awareness. At Ivy Hill Cemetery, a simple headstone marked his resting place. The inscription read simply, America's unknown child. No birth date, no family name. Just those three heartbreaking words that represented a life cut short and a community's collective grief. For 6 decades, that gravestone stood as Philadelphia's saddest monument, a reminder of a system that had failed to protect one of its most vulnerable residents. Visitors often commented that it felt like the loneliest grave in the cemetery, belonging to a child who lived invisible and died nameless. The case seemed destined to remain forever unsolved. Another cold file gathering dust in police archives. But in 2018, a revolutionary new technology was about to change everything. April 24, 2019. Ivy Hill Cemetery. For the second time in 2 decades, workers carefully exhumed the boy's remains. The first DNA extraction in 1998 had yielded a basic genetic profile, but it wasn't sophisticated enough for the cutting-edge technology now available to investigators. Forensic genetic genealogy was revolutionizing cold case investigations across America. This breakthrough method combined traditional DNA analysis with family tree research, allowing scientists to identify victims and suspects through distant relatives who had uploaded their genetic information to public databases. Cases that had stumped police for decades were finally being solved. The Golden State Killer had been caught using this technique. The Bear Brook murders were solved. Dozens of Jane and John Does were getting their names back. Philadelphia police recognized an opportunity to finally give their unknown child an identity. But Joseph's case presented an almost impossible challenge. Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick, the forensic genealogist who would lead the investigation, described his DNA as like confetti, completely fragmented after 6 decades in the ground. Most genetic material degrades significantly over time, but Joseph's remains had been buried since 1957, making his DNA basically shot. Traditional DNA testing requires long, intact genetic sequences. Forensic genealogy needed thousands of single nucleotide polymorphisms, tiny genetic markers scattered throughout the genome. Extracting usable data from Joseph's deteriorated remains would push the technology to its absolute limits. The Philadelphia Police Department's Office of Forensic Science had recently established their own forensic genealogy program, making Joseph's case a perfect candidate for this revolutionary approach. They partnered with Identifinders International, one of the leading firms in the field. The stakes couldn't be higher. This represented the best chance in 65 years to finally identify America's unknown child. Drop your theory in the comments. How do you identify someone from DNA fragments smaller than confetti? What followed next took 2.5 years of painstaking scientific work that would push forensic science to its absolute limits. After 2.5 years of painstaking work, extracting usable genetic data from Joseph's fragmented DNA seemed impossible. Dr. Fitzpatrick's team had managed to piece together enough single nucleotide polymorphisms for analysis, but they needed a genetic match in the public databases to begin building a family tree. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Somewhere in America, a person had uploaded their DNA profile to Ancestry.com for routine genealogical research. They had no idea their genetic information would become the key to solving one of Philadelphia's oldest mysteries. The match wasn't close. This person was Joseph's second cousin once removed, but it was the first genetic connection discovered in 65 years. Dr. Fitzpatrick's team immediately contacted this distant relative, explaining the situation and requesting help. They needed the person's mother, who would be Joseph's first cousin, to submit her genetic profile to GEDmatch, a public database used specifically for forensic investigations. She agreed. With this crucial genetic connection established, Fitzpatrick's team worked around the clock to reconstruct Joseph's family tree. Using the first cousin's DNA as an anchor point, they methodically traced backward through generations, identifying common ancestors and mapping the extended family network. The process was like solving a massive puzzle with pieces scattered across decades. Each genetic marker provided clues about family relationships. Each newly identified relative brought them closer to Joseph's immediate biological family. After months of intensive genealogical research, they made a stunning discovery. Both of Joseph's biological parents had been identified through the family tree reconstruction. Both were deceased. A court order was issued to obtain Joseph's birth certificate from Philadelphia's Vital Records Office. When the document arrived, it contained 6 words that would change everything about this case. Joseph Augustus Zarelli, birth certificate found. America's unknown child finally had his name. The identity revealed. Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick later described the technical challenges as unlike anything she'd encountered in her career. Joseph's DNA was completely degraded, she explained in interviews following the identification. We're talking about genetic material that had been buried for over 60 years. Most of what we recovered were tiny fragments. I called them confetti because that's exactly what they looked like under analysis. The process required cutting-edge techniques that pushed forensic science to its limits. Fitzpatrick's team at Identifinders International had to extract thousands of single nucleotide polymorphisms from DNA samples that most labs would have deemed unusable. We spent months just trying to get enough genetic markers to build a meaningful profile, she recalled. There were times we thought it might be impossible. The breakthrough came when they successfully generated enough SNP data to begin genealogical analysis. Working with the distant cousin's DNA profile, Fitzpatrick's genealogists reconstructed Joseph's family tree, identifying relatives across multiple generations until they could pinpoint his biological parents. On December 8, 2022, Philadelphia Police Commissioner Danielle Outlaw held a press conference that would make national headlines. After 65 years, we can finally give this child his name back, Outlaw announced. The victim, known as America's unknown child, has been identified as Joseph Augustus Zarelli. The birth certificate revealed Joseph was born on January 13, 1953, making him exactly 4 years old when he died in February 1957. His biological father was Augustus John Zarelli, and his mother was Mary Elizabeth Plunkett. Both parents were deceased, having died years before the identification breakthrough. Police revealed that Joseph had been living near 61st and Market Streets in West Philadelphia, contradicting early rumors about connections to a prominent Delaware County family. The reality was far more ordinary. Joseph lived in a working-class neighborhood, which made his complete invisibility to the community even more puzzling. Captain Jason Smith of the Philadelphia Police Homicide Unit addressed the media carefully. Through our investigation, we've discovered that Joseph has living siblings on both his maternal and paternal sides, Smith explained. Many of these relatives still live in the Philadelphia area. Out of respect for their privacy, we're not releasing their identities at this time. The genealogical investigation had revealed a complex family structure. Joseph had half-siblings and step-siblings, some of whom were completely unaware of his existence until police contacted them. The DNA analysis showed that his birth father, Augustus Zarelli, may not have even known Joseph existed, adding another layer of complexity to his tragic story. Dr. Fitzpatrick's team had to navigate delicate ethical territory during their investigation. The process of forensic genetic genealogy inherently involves family members who never consented to participate in a criminal investigation. We reached out to the distant cousin who had uploaded their DNA to Ancestry.com, Fitzpatrick explained. They were completely surprised to learn their genetic information was connected to a famous cold case. The investigation reportedly blindsided some of Joseph's living relatives, who suddenly found themselves connected to one of Philadelphia's most notorious unsolved murders. These family members had lived their entire lives unaware that they had a murdered sibling or half-sibling, and the revelation brought both shock and grief. Privacy concerns became a significant consideration for law enforcement. Police had to balance the public's desire for information with the legitimate privacy rights of Joseph's surviving family members. Commissioner Outlaw emphasized that the living relatives were not suspects and deserved protection from public scrutiny and media attention. The ethical implications of forensic genetic genealogy extend beyond individual cases. When people upload their DNA to commercial genealogy websites, they may unknowingly provide law enforcement with tools to investigate their extended family members. This case highlighted ongoing debates about genetic privacy, informed consent, and the responsibilities of commercial DNA companies to their users. Despite these concerns, the identification represented a monumental victory for forensic science and provided long-awaited closure for investigators who had worked the case for decades. Joseph's birth certificate was officially amended to reflect his true identity, and plans were made to replace his anonymous headstone with one bearing his actual name. The boy who had been America's unknown child for 65 years was finally Joseph Augustus Zarelli. December 8, 2022, marked a historic day for Philadelphia. Commissioner Danielle Outlaw stepped up to the podium at police headquarters, surrounded by detectives who had worked this case for decades. The media packed the room, sensing this would be something extraordinary. Today, we close one chapter in this child's story while opening a new one, Outlaw began, her voice carrying the weight of 65 years of investigation. The victim we have known as America's unknown child has been identified through forensic genetic genealogy as Joseph Augustus Zarelli. The announcement sent shockwaves through the true crime community and Philadelphia residents who had followed this case for generations. Social media exploded with reactions from people who had visited his grave, left flowers, or simply wondered about the boy's identity. News outlets across the country picked up the story, broadcasting the breakthrough to millions of viewers. Within days of the announcement, Philadelphia's Vital Records Office amended Joseph's death certificate. The clinical designation, America's Unknown Child, was officially replaced with his birth name, Joseph Augustus Zarelli. This simple administrative change carried profound symbolic weight. It transformed him from a case number into a person with a history, a family, and an identity. The most powerful moment came on January 13, 2023, what would have been Joseph's 70th birthday. Dozens of community members gathered at Ivy Hill Cemetery for the dedication of his new headstone. The old marker bearing those heartbreaking words, America's Unknown Child, was carefully removed and replaced with a beautiful memorial featuring his photograph, birth date, and name. Attendees included retired detectives who had worked his case, genealogy enthusiasts who had followed the DNA investigation, and ordinary Philadelphia residents who felt connected to Joseph's story. Many brought flowers, toys, and personal letters. Some wept openly as they read his name aloud for the first time. "It feels like he can finally rest in peace," said one visitor who had been leaving flowers at his grave for over 20 years. "He's not anonymous anymore. He's Joseph." The annual tributes that had occurred every February 25th took on new meaning. Instead of mourning an unknown child, the community now gathered to remember Joseph Augustus Zarelli specifically. Visitors shared stories about his case, discussed the breakthrough in forensic science, and honored his memory with personal mementos. Local schools began incorporating Joseph's story into lessons about forensic science and the importance of never giving up on justice. His case became a teaching tool, demonstrating how advancing technology could solve seemingly impossible mysteries. If you're still watching this incredible journey of how science gave a nameless child his identity back, smash that like button and share Joseph's story so others can learn about this breakthrough in forensic genealogy. But the victory was bittersweet. While Joseph finally had his name and dignity restored, his killer remained free. The person or people responsible for his brutal death had likely escaped earthly justice entirely. Joseph's identity had been recovered, but true closure, the arrest and conviction of his murderer, still remained elusive. The boy who lived invisible had finally been seen. Now the question became, would his killer ever be found? While Joseph Augustus Zarelli finally has his name, his murder remains an active homicide investigation. Captain Jason Smith of Philadelphia's Homicide Unit maintains that authorities have suspicions as to who may be responsible, though he refuses to elaborate due to the ongoing nature of the case. The passage of nearly 7 decades presents formidable challenges. Joseph's biological parents, Augustus John Zarelli and Mary Elizabeth Plunkett, are both deceased. The perpetrator themselves may also be dead, making arrest and prosecution increasingly unlikely with each passing year. Philadelphia police have offered a $20,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of Joseph's killer. They're particularly interested in hearing from individuals now in their 70s or 80s who might remember Joseph from the early 1950s, especially those who lived near 61st and Market Streets in West Philadelphia. Authorities also appeal to retired physicians who may have treated a child with Joseph's specific surgical scars, particularly in the groin and ankle areas. Every detail, no matter how small, could provide the final piece needed to solve this decades-old puzzle. Joseph's case has become a landmark achievement in forensic genetic genealogy. The extreme difficulty of extracting usable DNA from his severely degraded remains pushed the technology to its limits, creating new methodologies that benefit other investigations. Philadelphia police now apply these advanced techniques to additional unidentified remains and cold cases throughout the city. His story serves as inspiration for families of missing persons everywhere, proving that even the most challenging cases can find resolution through scientific advancement and persistent investigation. The Vidocq Society continues using Joseph's case as a model for solving other long-standing mysteries. From a cardboard box in frozen woods to a named headstone at Ivy Hill Cemetery, Joseph's journey represents both triumph and tragedy. He transformed from a symbol of failure into proof that justice, while sometimes delayed, need not be denied forever. Subscribe to TCI Crime Stories for more incredible cases like this, and tell us in the comments what cold case you think we should investigate next. Joseph Augustus Sorelli finally has his name back. Now he needs justice.